And welcome back, boys, to Shooting It Straight and to yet another, I think, groundbreaking, revolutionary video not found on any other YouTube gun channel. Now, despite my constant criticism of many YouTube gun channels, I have seen a lot of Glock related videos that I think were pretty well done. I just haven't found one on this particular topic, and it's an important topic, and that really surprises me. So I'm going to do that today, and I think it may be the first time you'll see something like this. Now I'm going to touch on the subject of Glock owners creating their own long-term preventive maintenance schedule, or PM program, PM schedule, however you want to say it. Now that's to ensure that your Glock stays running trouble-free in the most critical times. Now, I'm not talking about simply maintaining your Glock by the usual cleaning and lubing process. That's not what we're discussing here. That's more along the lines of regular or routine maintenance. We're talking long-term maintenance, specifically long-term preventive maintenance, which is designed to prevent parts failures while shooting. You know, if a part's going to break or fail, and a few components eventually will, you don't want that to happen in the middle of a competitive match or a deadly force encounter if you can help it, right? Now, having a schedule or a program laid out to replace those parts before they are expected to break or fail is the solution to that potential issue. Replacing those parts before they fail. And there's a way to do that. Now, of course, anything can go wrong at any time. We know that. But the goal is to reduce or minimize the chances of anything like that happening while we're in the middle of shooting. Now, we do that by periodically inspecting our gun components and replacing certain components at specific time intervals in order to prevent these mishaps at inopportune times. Now, these specific time intervals are measured in round count. Round count. Okay. This concept and methodology really applies to all firearms, but today I'm staying Glock specific since it is, still the most popular handgun in America, and it's one that I have the most experience in training with. Okay, so let's go ahead and get. Let's get right into it. The first thing you'll need to do is create a round count log. Now, this should outline exactly how many rounds you fire in every shooting session. Every time you go to the range, you need to log how many shots you fire, the date you fired them, and the type of ammo that you fired, such as, 100 rounds of 180 grain Winchester FMJ. Now, you can develop this on paper or in a booklet or in an electronic file. It doesn't really matter, but you need it documented, and you need to be able to review it and add data to it. And it may look something like this. All right, this is just an example. That might be what your round count log looks like. Every time you go to get back from the range, just record the date, the description of the ammo shot, how many rounds you fired, and any stoppages. And I'll get into that in just a second. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, you should also include the number of any malfunctions or stoppages encountered in that session and with what type or brand of ammo those malfunctions occurred with, because this may help in identifying any particular type of ammo or brand of ammo that for whatever reason is not agreeable with your gun. And if a particular magazine is a culprit or not, you'll know that too, or you should know that. Mark that magazine and keep it aside and try other ones. Round count is very important, since certain components of your Glock need to be or should be replaced after a certain number of rounds have been put through it. And you should keep a record of any and all parts that you replace and at what intervals you replace those things. Okay. Now there's there's nothing on your Glock, all right, that will simply wear out after thousands of rounds. Things don't wear out on pistols. In 30 years of shooting and owning Glocks, I've never seen anything wear out. However, there are certain components that can, and eventually will, crack, fail, or break after a while, particularly under heavy use. For example, springs will eventually lose tension with heavy use, right? We know that. The dual captured RSA, or recoil spring assembly, is rated by Glock to last about 5,000 rounds. That's the expected life rate of it. But I have found out that they will generally go almost twice that. Now, I don't know if they'll last beyond 10,000 rounds or not, because I don't want to push it. So I do change it out about every 8,000 rounds, whether I think it needs it or not, because you want to be on the safe side here. Your preventive maintenance log might look something similar to this. Okay, just whenever you replace something like a recoil spring unit, when you replace it, just record the date you replaced it and at what round count, 7,500. If you replace a trigger spring, replaced it in November of 2018 at 4,200 round count, and on like this. That's pretty simple, really. Now, generally, I'll replace the other springs about at the same time that I change out the RSA. I just go ahead and change out all the springs at once, such as the trigger spring, extractor, depressor, plunger spring, and the firing pin spring. Now, these are very inexpensive items that are all easy to replace, so it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And this is why the round count log is so critical. Now, just as a side note, as far as the magazine springs are concerned, I usually leave those alone. I've been around Glocks long enough to feel the tension on the spring and tell if it's losing that tension or not. So I don't really go by round count as far as the magazine springs go. Now, that's just my schedule. You might decide to replace the spring sooner, and that's perfectly fine if you do. Now, here's an important thing that I want to draw your attention to. There is one area of the Glock preventive maintenance that is caliber determinant, okay? And that is these two frame pins right here. Or if you have one, you might just have one frame pin. These two pins are going to have to be replaced at a certain time, a specific time, depending on caliber, okay? And calibers like 357 SIG, 10 millimeter, and 40 Smith & Wesson, I strongly advise you to put in new locking block pins and trigger pins at around the 15,000 mark, the 15,000 round mark, depending on the loadings you shoot, okay? because they have a very high chance of breaking somewhere shortly after that range, around the 16 to 18,000 rounds range. These pins, one or both of them, will break. Okay. 9mm is different. It can usually go closer to 100,000 rounds before these pins begin to fracture, because there's not as much violent force on those pins. Now you can get those two Glock OEM frame pins for a total of less than $10. And again, you can see the importance of keeping a round count log. Now, I have followed this same PM schedule for well over 20 years, and I've never had a Glock that had a parts failure yet. But I have seen other Glock owners that have had that issue because they didn't follow a PM schedule like this. And those were mainly competitive companions of mine who are, high volume shooters. Now, what I also suggest is that you keep some sort of a spare parts inventory. Okay, I keep a few spare key components on hand at all times, since we know that anything can happen at any time. But chance favors the prepared, right? Now, you don't necessarily need to create a log for this, but I would at least recommend that you just keep the packages unopened and keep them all together in a jar or a box or something like that. Keep them together so you know where everything is at. And keep the things that you're most likely to need, such as a recoil spring assembly, trigger spring, firing pin spring cups, slide lock, slide stop, magazine springs, or at least a couple of new magazines, spare magazines, firing pin safety and its spring that comes with it. What the hell is it? Yeah, the spring that comes with it. Because if you lose that spring, you can forget it. You'll never find it. Okay, now close this out. Let's go over a few tips and reminders to help ensure that we're not actually creating any of these problems. Okay. Never shoot non-jacketed lead bullets. Okay. These bullets leave tiny shards of lead in the rifling, and if that bore gets hot enough, those lead shards will actually weld to the rifling, and you won't be able to get that out. It's ruined many barrels. So anything you shoot, make sure it's jacketed ammo. Never use any type of a metal tool on your gun steel. All right, especially when scraping off any residue during cleaning or something. That can cause a deep scratch on the surface, which can then allow for corrosion to start. Use only plastic or wood or a bronze bristle brush. Don't use a steel brush. Use a bronze bristle brush. All right. Don't disassemble the magazines unless absolutely necessary. Now, they normally don't require cleaning unless it has been submerged in mud or sand. These things are not designed to be disassembled with any level of frequency, because doing so will eventually wear down these two polymer tabs here on the bottom that fit into that notch on the floor plate. You'll deform those notches and it won't be as secure. Okay, here's another one. If a product is not specifically designed to be used on firearms, then do not use it. That means no household products like Mean Green or WD-40, no automotive products like motor oil, brake cleaner, and shit like that. Listen, gun products such as your typical gun bore solvent and simple gun oil have already been proven safe for your Glock, for all firearms, even on the polymer sections of it. This is not true for products such as motor oil, which has harmful detergents in it, and it easily oxidizes, open air oxidation. or things like axle grease, which interferes with tight tolerances and collects debris, and WD-40, which leaves a film of residue when it dries that can bind actions eventually. So just stick with a simple gun products that's made specifically for guns. How hard is that? All right, resist the urge to switch out any internal factory parts for aftermarket parts. Those parts are no better than the factory parts, and Glock's warranty will not cover those parts or any problems that those parts may cause. Keep the interior chamber walls right here. Keep the interior chamber walls scrubbed clean. Residue gets pressed up against the walls when the case expands during firing, and it will get burned onto those walls. Eventually, this builds up, and it will cause failures to feed and failures to extract because the chamber will become too tight. The only way to effectively clean this stuff out off of the walls in there is to literally scrub it off with a bronze bristle brush. This is one reason why I don't use a bore snake for cleaning. It doesn't do that. Never simply drop a cartridge into the chamber and then release the slide on top of it. That will guarantee that you chip that extractor claw. All cartridges must be fed into the gun, into the chamber, by magazine only. Semi-automatic handguns are designed for the magazine to, and I'll use this as an example, this empty case. They're designed for the magazine spring to push the case rim here where the notch is, the groove, up into the extractor claw from the bottom up. All right, that's what it's supposed to do. When you drop a cartridge in the chamber and then slam the slide home, you're forcing that extractor claw to hit and snap around and go and jump that rim right there. Okay, it's going to snap out and around to get into that groove, and that eventually is going to chip your extractor. All right, I think this might be the last one. Don't detail strip your Glock unless absolutely necessary. Now, there are times when you got to do that, such as a deep cleaning after, I don't know, maybe 5,000 rounds or so, or if it's submerged in sand or mud or something like that, or to replace a part. But these things should be rare. All right, the simple field strip, the 4 common parts for routine cleaning should be about as far as you go in most cases. The biggest reason is that the frequent removal of these frame pins will eventually expand these holes on the frame, which can cause those pins to eventually start walking out while you're firing. I know this because I've seen it happen. And it's not just Glock, it happens with all polymer frame handguns. Okay? Alright fellas, that brings this video to an end. I hope I was able to pass on a bit of useful information and tips to help you keep your Glock up and running and at its best if you ever need it. It's just another part of my goal aimed at helping you to become a better prepared concealed carrier and a responsible gun owner. So, thanks for watching. I'm Antonius, and I believe in shooting it straight. Ciao.